Hey, everybody, welcome to the Distorted Podcast. We cover mental health topics. I try to bring it with some clarity so that it's easy to understand. And today's topic is going to be basically stress-related. Holidays are coming up. This probably won't post till after holidays, but that's okay. Still relevant. You have stress that happens on a regular basis, and everyone knows the word. It's another one of these concept words, positive stress, negative stress. Honestly, the way that I look at stress, especially from a cognitive perspective, is that stress is necessary. Even when we talked about anxiety being necessary. Trying to debunk this idea that we should be worried about these concepts, that we should think of these concepts as negative. They're not negative, they're neutral. These are just concepts. These are things that you have to navigate in order to be successful in life. And so stress is no different. And to be honest, stress really isn't stress until you run out of tolerance. And so I often say to people, stress is what's left over when your tolerance runs out. Where does tolerance come from? Let's set that premise before we dive into stress. Tolerance comes from what you put in, how you take care of yourself, okay? Oftentimes I will use the analogy or the anagram pies for how to take care of yourself: physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. That's a premise of self-care that says basically you have to work on these four areas as a person in order to have a well-rounded approach to stuff that happens, and it helps with coping. The more diversity you have in your coping, the more things you can cope with, and in the more environments you can do it in. So it's not just coping at home, but you can do it at work, you can do it when you're at school, at church, wherever you're at. So the tolerance piece is, are you feeding yourself? Are you getting fed? Are you doing the things necessary to pursue things that are valuable to you, that are important to you? Are you doing those things on a regular basis? Let's say weekly. It's not something you might do every day. But at least on a weekly basis, are you engaging in those four areas of your life? That's going to build you up. That's going to build you up with confidence, with self-esteem, with an ability to have energy for things, just like regulating sleep. And so now when something happens that is difficult, that we have to invest more energy into, you'll have a tank at which to pull from. Stress is that outcome we talk about when something becomes more difficult because you're putting more energy into it. You can think of it like this. Stress is similar to friction in that it's necessary for movement. When a car drives down the road, there is friction or stress, if you will, between the tires and the road. That adherence is what lets the car go, and it moves it forward right along with engine and everything else. But just think about the tires for a minute. They're tracking, and so you need that in order to propel. You need that for movement. So that friction that happens when you're confronted with something difficult creates stress in the form of anxiety, in the form of anger, in the form of sadness, whatever lens it has to be in. And then it starts to affect you, right? Something that we would call a stressor is, again, when we start to look at, I'm past the point of tolerance. It's no longer functional, and it's becoming difficult for me to navigate. Let me give it to you another way so this makes sense. Somebody who is a firefighter, a police officer, somebody who works in the military, a nurse, medical field, when they go into a crisis situation, the stress is higher, but it doesn't mean it's stressful. Because there's another component that's also added to this, which is training. When you are exposed to something, it goes into the category of sort of self-care. The more you do a thing, the better you get at it, the less it affects you negatively. That means I can deal with it. It's not putting me past my tolerance. Training is one of the ways that we get people prepared for what would be considered crisis. My background in crisis intervention, everything from law enforcement to military to being on a crisis response team. I've done all three of those things. And then to get into working at a mental health facility, which I did for years, and then private practice. So tons of crisis intervention experience that I've been exposed to, which makes me, for lack of a better way of saying it, I'm not normal, folks. I have a higher threshold than the average person. And that's good in the cases where I was exposed to a higher sense of what would be considered a stressful moment. Danger, emergent, unknown. Any of those three things can cause stress to go up because you can't prepare. And so, the example of, I use this example a lot too, getting sideswiped by a bus, falling off my bike in the middle of the road, having been trained on not losing yourself in a moment of crisis, which I guess that would be, right? Tucking and rolling because I had practiced hitting the ground a certain way, getting up off the ground fast enough, make an assessment that I could move my body, get out of the street, assess again for injury to make sure I could do the things I needed to do, and then have the frame of mind to walk over to where the bus was that happened to gratefully stop to pick up people, not realizing that I'd just been sideswiped and knocked off my bike. Had the presence of mind to, again, once I did my self-check, remove myself from the danger, and then go up to the bus driver and explain to the person that they hit me. That all happened very quickly. Again, does everybody respond that way? Well, obviously, no. That's not how everybody responds to something like that. The experiences that I've had, the training that I've had in my past, even though I'm older now and fatter, I still have it in me to be able to do those things in a moment of crisis. So I did those things. I was able to assess for physical injury. I was actually keep myself from too much physical injury. God saw fit to keep me safe from losing my life in that scenario. And then to be able to move myself to a safer position, to assess damage, to be able to think about what's the next steps and do it safely, okay? All that stuff took place. And needless to say, I'm okay. So again, crisis moment, emergent, unknown, all those things are happening. Those create stress. And in fact, it created stress for me in that moment. But due to my self-care regimen that I do have, due to the fact that I've been trained multiple times in multiple different areas and have had plenty of time to mentally rehearse those kinds of things, it did not take me past my tolerance. That's all that matters with this. Everybody has a different level, but my level wasn't breached. I was not beyond my tolerance. So the event, although at a stressful event, here we go, did not stress me out. It just didn't, okay? I had enough to deal with it, okay? I had enough to deal with it. My wife wouldn't mind if I shared this piece, so I'm going to share another version of this. Because of my background in both the medical and mental, in having to deal with difficult people in difficult situations, at one point in my history, my wife had gone through the experience of having a seizure. And it happened in front of me. And it happened in front of me to the point where I sort of couldn't get out of the way. Rather than her fall and hurt herself, I sort of guided her to the ground midway. Because she was seizing at that time, I had my hand kind of trapped underneath her. With my free hand, I got my phone out and dialed 911. So of all the things to think about, the most stressful situation, again, unknown, unexpected, crisis situation, medically induced, all the things that would cause stress to increase. And it did not affect me past the point of me knowing what I have to get done to get it done. To the point that once she was safe enough, I went ahead and went to the door, unlocked it, opened it so that when fire arrived, they would know which place to go to. They could come in without any impediment because the door was locked. They wouldn't have been able to get in. Monitor what was going on with my wife, giving her space, making sure she wasn't hurt. Because I don't know if anybody knows that when you wake up from something like that, you do have a disorienting effect where you don't know what's going on. That's normal for someone who's going through that. Again, but having the most beloved person to you in one side of you and the cell phone in the other so I could call 911. Again, that's not normal. I hope everybody understands it. That's not normal. I have a lot of experiences in my background that cause me to not be normal, but I would tell you it's in a good way. I don't experience fear the same way. I don't experience stress the same way. I don't experience injuries in the same way. My frame of mind changes. And again, I don't have the same physical attributes that I once had when I was younger, but I still have the mental capacity to navigate problems, think about details and these types of things. And you have to practice those things. You have to get comfortable. Give you one more parallel on this. To be assertive, which I might do a whole podcast on assertiveness. To be assertive, you have to practice putting yourself in a situation where you're comfortable speaking something to someone else that might refuse you or might turn you down. You might have a consequence for doing that. You understand that most people don't just flip a switch and become assertive. You practice that kind of thing. That, along with self-care, puts you in a position where you can request a change in behavior from another human being, because it opens you up to the fact that you might have a consequence for doing so. Could be positive, could be negative. You're better prepared. You experience less stress. Across the board with anything that you're going to do. Athletes, why can they compete at a higher level? Because they've done it for so long. You're freaking out because you want your team to win a game. They don't have that. They have to stay calm. They can't freak out while they're playing, okay? They have to stay calm so they can accurately do what they have to do. They can celebrate afterwards, but while they're in it, they have to stay focused and that takes practice. They're concentrating on something. The stress is there for sure. Millions of dollars at stake if they win or lose a particular game, playoff-wise. But they're not stressed in that moment because they've trained themselves up to that moment, okay? So back to stress. If stress is an issue for you, understand that one of the first steps you have to take is you have to build up your tolerance to be able to navigate difficult situations, especially if you know you're going to be exposed. If you know ahead of time, hey, I've got a particular job where I'm going to be exposed to these things, you're probably going to have some training that's already there in place. But let's say you weren't expecting something to be stressful. Let's say you're preparing for marriage and you got to plan a wedding. Well, yeah, that could be stressful. You could say, well, that seems dumb. You're comparing. Well, no, for some people, that's a very stressful thing. Lots of things to do, lots of things to plan, take care of. My wife had stress. I planned it. I told her what had to be done every month leading up to I couldn't do it because I wasn't going to be the one picking things, but I could certainly keep track of the clock, the money, and say, okay, this is our month for picking out flowers. And so I did all of that. I did that to reduce her stress, okay? Everybody responds to stress differently. Everybody has a different threshold for what they can tolerate. Not everybody has an ability to work in the medical field because somebody being injured is enough to throw them off their thinking game and they can't concentrate. And so again, to regulate your stress, first of all, you have to know, what am I putting myself into? If I'm making decisions that are going to lead me to higher end stress items, then I'm going to have to do more care to be able to navigate that. That's just how it works. Something that is stressful in its nature does not mean you will experience the thing that we call stress. What is that? Stomachache, headache, sweaty, dizziness, lack of focus. It's like a NyQuil commercial, right? You list all these attributes that can come from the physical manifestation of having experienced something stressful. It's mental, it's physical, right? You might need more sleep, you're tired. As you work on this area, what you're doing is you're not eliminating stress. You're just reducing it so it's manageable. And when it's not, you're going to experience stress. Can you get through it? Can you recover? You've heard me use the word resiliency before. Can you be resilient after you've experienced a stressful moment? I got to go talk to somebody who I'm not comfortable talking to. You're going to have anticipatory stress. And it starts to blend into anxiety a little bit, but trust me, it's different. Having anxiety can cause you to have peaks in your stress, but not always, okay? Anger as a response can cause you stress because some people, believe it or not, out there in this world, do not like confrontation, okay? Confrontation is stressful to them. Just the idea of having to face another individual. Okay? Now again, just like being assertive, you might have to practice. Lawyers have to practice being confrontational because it is part of that job. And sometimes you're defending or persecuting someone who you may not even believe is guilty. Or you may believe they are and you have to defend them. They have rights still. That can cause stress for somebody, I would imagine. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I have master's level interns that come and go through my program. You've met a few of them on the podcast. It's stressful to be in that situation. They're working. Typically, they're going to school, and then they have to add an internship to it. Oh, that's stressful, all that stuff. All of that. And then they have families, too, on top of it, some of them. I'm always amazed. You get a young lady that's in front of me wanting to finish a degree, and she's juggling home life and work life and school life, and then she's got to deal with me. And she's trying to learn a new craft and learn how to do, that thing we call counseling. And so if you don't think that's stress, of course it's stressful. But I can tell you, they do handle it differently. I've watched that experience. They handle it differently. And that's okay. That's how it works. And so then you talk about the self-care that's involved. As you are in a process of something that is stressful, you talk about, what it looks like to recover from that. That's the self-care work. I'll throw another one out there. Some people do not like to speak publicly. You can call it stress. You can call it anxiety. It's a little bit of both, right? The anxiety is the thought process that goes into thinking about what it is to publicly speak. The stress then builds up as it becomes overwhelming because you end up with non-resolvable processes in there that say, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. This is going to be difficult. This is too much. And when you don't resolve it cognitively, stress is a manifestation of the overwhelming part of that, okay? So you can feel stress. You might start to get the shakes or sweats or a stomach ache or a headache, especially right before you're about to go and do your presentation. The only way to work through something like that is to expose yourself to it and increase your self-care. It's not just an automatic thing that everyone has stress for doing something like that. That particular event comes with fear and embarrassment because you can mess up and you're going to have people watching you mess up. If I flub a word here and there, I really don't care. Some people would lose themselves to that. This would have ended, I would have said, Producer Shannon, we're starting from the beginning. But I don't care. It doesn't stress me out if I flub a word. I really don't care. I'm just going to keep going. It doesn't take me off my game to do that. That's just practice. Sting famously said, if he makes a mistake while he's playing a song, he just makes that same mistake again when the verse comes back and everybody thinks it's part of the song, right? That's confidence on his part. It's also practice, repetition, exposure, training. He doesn't have to worry about that. He'll just make it a part of the song and no one will be the wiser. That's not a skill that everybody just automatically has. You understand you have to work at that. Okay? So, a little bit of a review. You have stress. It is in everyone's life. It is neither good or bad. What makes something a stressor or stress you out is when you've run out of tolerance to deal with it. You cannot simply peg it to an event. Some people in the professions that they are in can handle stress. They can handle dealing with violence. They can handle dealing with deadlines, and it doesn't stress them out. So you can't just pin it on an item or an event. It has to do with your preparedness and what you're doing to take care of yourself as that buildup comes. Okay? You work on this. If you have an area, this is a concern for you, work on it. Get better at this. Don't just leave it to, I can't do it. That's a distortion. Don't just leave it to, I'm not smart enough, I don't have the skills. That's a distortion. You can work towards those things. If ultimately something you're doing is completely foreign to you and uncomfortable to you, yeah, that's real too. You might have to switch careers. You might have to go a different direction. But don't give up the first time something pushes back against you, makes you feel out of sorts, overwhelmed. Don't give up. Address it. Address it. Okay? Stress is useful to move us forward. Okay? If you don't deal with it, it certainly will stop you. Stress goes up. Your tolerance will balance it to keep you at a baseline. If stress goes up and there's nothing pushing back on it, it pushes you past your baseline. We would call that stress. Tolerance lowers the stress level, brings you back to baseline. That's resiliency. That's how you regulate, whether it's intellectual, emotional, physical. That's how we regulate that, okay? All right. Questions about this, comments about this, put them in there. I can always address this again in a future podcast. it's just, I just don't want stress to become the thing out here that you can't deal with it because we don't even know what it is. It manifests just like anything else, like the flu, okay? It can affect you mentally and physically. It can be managed. And if you ever do actually experience it, it doesn't have to turn into forever. It does go away. You do come back to normal when the event, time and distance, you've heard that before. You can reduce these things naturally, or you can start taking the initiative to invest in this and get them done faster. Okay? Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Thanks for joining us on Distorted. Follow us however you can, but primarily we're on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Pod, and Spotify. Add a comment, share it with your friends. We appreciate you.